Hey everyone, Gabriel Rodriguez here from Customs Brokerage. So we all know that large amounts of congestion, skyrocketing prices is making shipping containers worldwide a little bit more difficult these days. So I wanted to put this little quick video together just to kind of give an update as to why these things are going on. Factor number one, COVID. We all know that COVID was a huge contributing factor to what's going on as far as the world shutting down and reopening, the world shutting down at different points. And that contributed to equipment being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sometimes there was cargo ready to be loaded and no available containers. And sometimes there's containers sitting over here on the other side of the ocean empty, waiting to get loaded onto a vessel and shipped back overseas. So that factor contributed to the initiation of what's going on in the world market today. From there, carriers, unfortunately, in order to recover schedules, would implement what are called blank sailings. And blank sailings is basically where they skip out either a particular trade lane or an entire sailing loop altogether in order to recover schedule integrity. No reason to have a vessel sitting around in a port waiting around when it could be moving around at some other port. So case in point, late last year and into this year, Port of LA had up to 50 vessels sitting outside, docked outside, waiting to unload. And that's the reason why carriers would blank sailing, so that they wouldn't have a vessel just sitting there idle for weeks on end. That situation, by the way, has improved. LA has reduced the amount of vessels that it has had idle, and they've improved in the amount of time that it's taken to unload those vessels. One of the factors that contributed to that, again, going back to COVID, is unfortunately port workers either getting sick with the COVID virus or trying to avoid getting the COVID unfortunately dwindled down the labor pool a little bit, and that led to some of the congestion that was going on. So roll pools, this is where cargo was loaded at origin ports, and unfortunately vessels would arrive, and there was more containers than space on the vessel to have them loaded, so containers would roll. This primarily happened in Asia, where cargo was loaded into containers from factories as post-COVID factories kicked back into production, and U.S. importers, ramped up their purchasing. Unfortunately, less space on the vessels than there was for the amount of containers going out, and containers would just sit at the ports waiting for vessels to come through. That would kick into 1 week after another, and unfortunately, sometimes containers would sit around for a couple of weeks before they were finally loaded on the vessels that they were intended for. This combined scenarios that I've just discussed already, unfortunately started to contribute to the steamship lines increasing their prices. It's a market demand, right? The carriers were able to take advantage of this situation by increasing their prices and making space on the vessel a priority to whomever the highest bidder was. So that contributed to just an escalation of prices, to the extent that some of the larger shippers, as the Chinese contract season rolled around earlier this year, allowed some of the larger shippers to just sign year-long contracts at very high prices.